one of North America's favorite perennials. This is native to the United States and much of Canada, black-eyed Susan. In this video, we'll go over how to plant, how to fertilize, how to water, disease control, and so much more, so that you can have great black-eyed Susans that look like this. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. Before we get into the cultural aspects of black-eyed Susan, let's talk about its cultural importance in the United States of America. So this is the state flower of Maryland, and in Maryland they have a horse race called the Preakness, and the Preakness is known as the run or the race for the black-eyed Susan. So the winner of the race will have a wreath of black-eyed Susans put around their neck. Also, the University of Southern Miss, their colors are black and gold, and it's inspired by the black-eyed Susan. So all up and down the east coast of the United States, this plant has cultural importance. Black-eyed Susans can be grown in USDA zones 3 through 11. So all the way up into Canada, all the way down into Florida, all the way out to California, all the way to the east coast, you can grow black-eyed Susans as long as you give them the correct cultural practices. So the first thing you want to give them is full sun. The more sun that your black-eyed Susans have, the better. They can take some part sun, so let's say 6 to 4 hours of direct sunlight a day. They'll do okay, but they're not going to thrive in those conditions. If you can give them 8 or more hours of sun per day, your black-eyed Susans will work much better for you. Another cultural aspect we need to be aware of when selecting a place to plant black-eyed Susans is soil types. You want a well-drained soil. My native soils here, they're 80 to 90% sand. I don't have to worry a whole lot about the soils holding excessive amounts of water. But if you live in an area with anaerobic soils, so gray soils or clays that hold a lot of water, this may not be the plant for you. If this plant is sitting in constant water, you're going to have issues with root rot, Pythium and Phytophthora in particular. So you want to give these an area to where it can get some water, but it's not sitting in water all the time. And while I'm mentioning soils and water, let's talk about how often should you be watering black-eyed Susans. In the first year, when you plant them, you'll want to water those at least once a week, but once they're established, you don't have to water unless you're in a severe drought situation. So this summer, I have not watered these at all. We're on the tail end of the bloom cycle here. Most of these have already gone to seed, and they've received 0 water from irrigation. It's all been rainwater. I don't want to be misleading here. I have had a lot of rain this summer, but even in an average summer, I'm still not watering these. So if they don't get water for 10 to 14 days, I may come out and soak the ground, saturate it really well, and let it completely dry out and stay dry for maybe a week. It'd take a week to dry out completely, and then another week beyond that. So that 10 to 14 day interval, I would come out and water again if I didn't get rain during that time period. With black-eyed Susans being a native plant, there's not a whole lot we need to do in terms of fertilization. I will come out here in early spring and I will lightly sprinkle a slow release prill like Osmocote over the top of these black-eyed Susans, and that's only because I'm in 80 to 90% sands, and a lot of my nutrients will naturally leach through those sandy soils. But if you have a more clay or silt-rich soil, oftentimes you're not going to need to fertilize black-eyed Susans at all. If you put mulch down in the winter after you deadhead and prune back, we'll talk more about that here in a minute. You put mulch down over the top of these in the winter. As that mulch decomposes, all the nutrients you need for black-eyed Susans will be provided. If you want your black-eyed Susans to have continuous blooms like you see here, so black-eyed Susans are naturally going to bloom. For my area in zone 8A, I'm going to start getting blooms in late May. We're going to hit a peak around early July. And if I come in deadhead, I'll get a second flush like you see here. I'm currently in early September and I still have some flowering here. So to deadhead, what I like to do is come in and remove a flower stalk. I'll go down to the last 2 sets of leaves. I will leave 2 sets of leaves on a flower stalk and I will remove that flower. And I'll do this right in the peak of flowering, so that July time frame. So that gives me roughly 60 days from, so we're 60 days past that, and you can see I've got a second flush of flowers periodically coming up in here. Now, you can take as many flowers off as you want, but the way that I like to do it, this is a pollinator garden. We have lots of bees and moths and butterflies coming through here, especially late summer, all the migratory butterflies and the migratory hummingbirds as well. They're all moving through here. And I don't want to cut all this off at once. So I'll cut about 1/3 of them out. And what that does is, as that original flower presence begins to fade out and it goes to seeds like you see on this one, the ones that I pruned back, they're just now coming to flower. So we're providing nutrients for the wildlife here in the garden for a longer period of time. And also, as we head into winter, I will not completely cut all these down. I'll leave some of these seed heads up for the birds. So we have lots of birds that come in here through the winter, in particular American golden finch. They just love this area. They'll be in here by the dozens, feeding on echinacea seeds and black-eyed Susan seeds and Shasta daisy seeds. And so we try to leave some of those up. So after the first frost of the season, and for me in zone 8A where I'm at, my average last frost is November the 11th, which means 50% of the time it's before November the 11th, 50% of the time it's after November the 11th. A good general rule of thumb for me is between Halloween and Thanksgiving, I'm going to have a frost. And once that occurs, I can come in here and cut these Shasta daisies, these black-eyed Susans off at the ground. And literally just take head shears, gas shears, battery-powered shears, whatever you have, and cut them off maybe 6 inches above the ground. Come in with mulch. It really doesn't matter if you're using pine bark mulch or pine nuggets or whatever you have readily available in your area, and cover the plants. The leaves have done what they're going to do. After the frost, there's no longer any leaves on this to have photosynthesis and create sugars and store sugars down in the roots for the next year. That process is over. So we can go ahead and cut these off at the ground. If you're in a more northern climate, so earlier we said zones 3 through 11 is where this can grow. If you're in zones 4 and zones 3, you're way up in the northern United States or up into Canada even, I would highly encourage you to mulch over the top of these. That's going to hold some ground heat in for you. You're creating a little microclimate. So if it gets down to say negative 20 degrees one night in your area, well, if you were to take a thermometer and put it down in the mulch, maybe it's only -5. So you can create like a 10 to 20 degree temperature buffer between the atmospheric temperatures and up underneath your mulch. Think of your mulch as like a blanket for your plants, and they're going to do that much better for you come spring. If you're fortunate enough to have a little piece of land like I have here, and you can landscape and you're not just growing your black-eyed Susans in a pot on a porch, I would encourage you to have some companion plants with it. And so what are some good companion plants for black-eyed Susans? And I have several here, and most of these are going to be able to grow in the majority of the range that black-eyed Susans can grow in. Some of these aren't going to make it all the way up into zone 3 and 4 as perennials, but you could treat them as annuals. And the first one is an annual regardless of where you're at, and that's zinnia. So zinnia is a great pollinator plant. The thing I like about zinnias is as my black-eyed Susans are turning off in terms of flower, the flowers really start to pop on my zinnias. So July time frame, my black-eyed Susans, they're in full bloom, and they start to fade off in August, and that's when the zinnias really start to shine. Another one is, this can be an annual or a perennial depending on where you live, is lantana. I'm in zone 8A. There's maybe half a dozen cultivars of lantana that are considered perennial for me. Probably the most popular is Miss Huff. And so, but most of them are going to be annuals. Here again, a great flower for pollinator gardens. And lantana, depending on cultivar, they'll start blooming in May, and we'll get a bloom all the way through frost with some of them. So you can get a big, long time frame in terms of blooms with your lantana. So you can get some pre-bloom in relation to your black-eyed Susans. You can get some post-bloom in relation to your black-eyed Susans as well. Another one is Shasta daisies. So Shasta daisies are a perennial in almost identical situations in terms of USDA cold hardiness as your black-eyed Susans. Can't get all the way up into zone 3 if I remember right. I think it's a 4 or 5 for Shasta daisies, but it's a really stark contrast. You have the white flower with the yellow center with Shasta daisy, and then you have the yellow petals with the black center with your black-eyed Susans. I really like the contrast in those. They grow about the same height. There's going to be some differences in height with your cultivars. So some of your cultivars with Shasta daisies can be dwarf or even up into the 4 or 5 foot tall range. Same with black-eyed Susans. So you can match up your cultivar heights. So you can really just Google this. Look at black-eyed Susans, type that into Google and say black-eyed Susan cultivars, and it'll give you the height of the different cultivars. You can do that with Shasta daisy. Say I want some that both get 3 feet tall. Well, I've got Goldstrom here. That's the cultivar that I have. It's 2.5, 3 feet tall. I've got some Shasta daisies that are Becky, and they get 2.5, 3 feet tall, and they mirror up really nice together. So that's just a handful of perennials and annuals that you can marry up with your black-eyed Susans to give your garden a little bit more pop and some prolonged flower coverage. I would be remiss to talk about black-eyed Susans and not mention cultural and disease control. And really, black-eyed Susans, though I mentioned it earlier, one thing you need to look for is root rots. And as long as you have well-drained soils, you don't have a whole lot to worry about. Now, black-eyed Susans are a member of the aster family, and although I've never seen a phenotypic response to aster yellow in black-eyed Susans, it can be a host. And so I used to have a lot of echinaceas in here. As a matter of fact, I've got some right here, and they all got aster yellow. So all the flowers kind of, hope that's in focus, they kind of look like this now. And so I have to treat my echinacea like annuals. So they last a year or two, they get like this and they die. That's just one thing to be aware of. If you have lots of flowers in your garden that are members of the aster family and you're not seeing aster yellow, you're doing really well. So you may want to consider black-eyed Susan off away from the rest of those plants so that the aster yellow doesn't have a likelihood of, or a reduced likelihood of spreading. I'm not going to say it's not going to spread at all, because it's spread by leaf hoppers. So they go from one plant to the other, phloem feeding, and so they'll take the phloem out of one plant that's infected, go to another plant and begin to feed, and now that plant has it. So that's just something to look out for if you have other members of the aster family in your garden. For this next segment, I had to go in and change shirts. We had a rain shower come through and everything got pretty wet, but I think it's dried off enough that I can show you about seed collection. So in the fall, as these seed heads begin to dry out, you can collect these, and you'll know they're ready when you just lightly rub your thumb over the seeds and they fall down into your other hand. You'll know that these have dried out enough for you to collect them. So how do I like to collect these? I'll cut off several and I will put them in a brown paper bag. And then what I'll do with the bag is I'll put it in the refrigerator for 30 days. And this acts like a chilling requirement for the seeds. I'm not necessarily certain that that's necessary for black-eyed Susan, but it's just something for all seeds that I do. I get a great germination rate with these, and you can plant these indoors starting about 30 to 45 days before your first frost. For me, that's April the 11th. So early March, I can start these in containers in a south-facing window indoors, or I can wait until after my last frost, which is usually around April the 11th. I'll get to April the 11th. I'll look at the long-range forecast. If I don't see any cooling trends in the 10 days moving forward, I'll go ahead and plant the seeds out in the yard. It's really simple. All you need to do is rake back your mulch, scatter your seeds on the ground, put the mulch back over the top, and you will have black-eyed Susans come up where you planted those seeds. That's just another way to get you some free black-eyed Susans. I hope this video helps you with growing black-eyed Susans in your garden. If you have a tip, trick, or hack that you use for black-eyed Susans in your garden that we did not go over here, please leave that down in the comments below. Here on the channel, I like to think of us as a community of learners, and I would love to learn something from you, the viewer. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor, and until next time, happy gardening.